I'm a writer. I've been dreaming about writing the words that could change the world since the very first time someone called me a mean name, and I understood the incredible power words have. The world was my blank page, and I was the author of my own first-person narrative. When I start writing a story, I tend to start backward, because I usually know how I want it to end. The ending is always the most important to me. So I start with my happy ending, and then I start working on the beginning. And from there, the middle of the story is built. This was how I tried to live my life as well. If I wanted to get to the end, my beginning had to start a certain way, often meaning a drastic change of some sort. And from there, I could fill in the rest. Only this doesn't work so well in real life. It wasn't before long that I began to realize that the rest of the world wasn't cooperating with the story I'd been writing for myself. If I was my own protagonist, reality was my ultimate antagonist, the arch enemy of my story. The rest of the world rarely cared about furthering my story, let alone helping me to get to my happy ending. There were plot twists I never saw coming, and often when I finally made my way to what I thought might be the end, or at least an end, it was a hollow victory. It was never the end. It was never enough. For someone writing my own story, I felt amazingly out of control of the whole thing. For 24 years, I tried to keep moving forward. I'm a firm believer that authors are driven by two motives: the desire to be loved for their creation, and the desire to be known through their creation. In my reality, my creation was myself, and it was neither loved nor known. And I was ready for the story to be over. So I stopped writing the story. But something, somehow, kept it moving forward. I could only ignore the truth of it for so long. Someone else was writing my story. There was someone else writing the whole story, and I needed to know who it was. As I said, an author wants to be known through his creation. So I finally opened my eyes and started looking around me. I discovered it wasn't just me. There was so much more to take into consideration. I began to understand this author hadn't just made me, he'd authored an entire world. I started studying my author, looking back into my story, and seeing something fuller, something I hadn't seen before. I had to understand what was going on. And then a friend one day told me I could stop studying him from a distance, and I could get to personally know him instead. But why would the author of the universe want to know me? It took me a while to truly understand that just like I love every character I've ever created, every effort I've poured on the blank pages of notebook paper, and every moment I've spent lost in the fictional worlds I've created, the author of the universe loves me because he made me. So where did this leave me? Every day, I wake up in God's story, and I have a choice what role I get to play. Some days I'm the protagonist. Some days, more of a supporting character. But one thing has become increasingly clear. I'm not the main character of this story. I'm his. And this is his story.
Make sure I got all that worked out. Got there for later. So have you ever stopped to think about what's your story? Over the last couple of weeks and next couple of weeks, as we continue the series, we've been examining the life of Joseph and imagining what he might say to someone as he was sitting in the pit or in the cage or in the jail cell or in the palace, wherever he might have been, as someone just kind of looked over him and said, "Hey, what's your story?" We all have a story, and we, like the lady in the video, we all think that we are the point. It's about what we want, about what our desires are, what our goals are, and so many times we are the central character, and we think it's all about us. And we forget that our story really isn't our story. Our story is God's story. Joseph went from being the favored son in his father's house, one of the youngest children in the house, managing his older brothers, right, doing things that were reserved for the eldest in the family, to being despised by his brothers, captured by his brothers, sold into slavery by his brothers. And when he, last week as we looked, as he was down in this pit, you got to wonder what the range of emotions he must have been going through was. Anger, bargaining, fear, panic. I don't know about you, but those are things that I can relate to, where I found myself in a position in my story where I didn't expect to be there. I thought God had something more for me. I thought He had something better, and I didn't understand why I was going through the adversity that I was going through. And I sat there angry. I sat there in fear. I sat there and I pleaded and begged and bargained with God. And I sat there and panicked and tried to make things happen. Can you imagine? I have this image of Joseph trying to desperately claw his way out of the pit and climb out of the pit. I don't know about you, but that's something I can relate to. I can relate to trying to get out that pit and falling flat on my tail and being in worse off shape than I was before. And so that's where we left Joseph last week. We left him being pulled out of the pit and sold into slavery. And Genesis chapter 37 says that he was sold to the house of Potiphar in Egypt. And Potiphar is a high-ranking official. He's not the king. Pharaoh was the king, but Potiphar was a high-ranking official in the Pharaoh's house. And so we open, if you have your Bibles today, we're in Genesis chapter 39, and I'm not going to read everything today. We're going to jump around a bit. We're going to cover Genesis 39 through 40. But as we get here, we look at what has happened once Joseph got to Egypt. He's been sold, he's been bought, and now he's in the Potiphar's house. And verse 1 says, Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. Now, listen, I think that's a pretty wild thing. Here is Joseph, and that he's described as a successful man. And because the Potiphar sees that Joseph is successful and that God is with Joseph, he says, hey, I want to get in on some of that. I'm going to put him in charge of my stuff. That way, his success will bleed over into my stuff, and I'll have some success. Just a thought. That's not an official point, so you just keep going. Verse 5, from the time that he made him an overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. So here's Joseph. He's a slave. Now, he could have taken this, and he could be walling around, and he could be angry with God, and he could be questioning God. Because remember, Joseph is the same Joseph that's had dreams of his family bowing down around him. As they were sheaves of wheat, as they were suns and moons and stars, and they all bowed to him. And the one with the stars and the sun and the moon, what was cool about that dream was that moon represented his mother who was dead, which meant that this significance of this dream wasn't about a physical action, but rather his place in history. that he would be more important than anybody in his family in history. So this is the dream he had. This is the guy. He's the guy with the manager's coat, the coat of many colors. And now he's a slave in Egypt. And you can imagine, like, man, this is not the job I wanted. This is not what I thought I was going to be doing. This is not where I thought you were going to bring me. But instead of having that bad attitude, he saw where he was. He took stock of the situation, and he said, I'm still going to follow the Lord. Whether it was where he wanted to be or not, he still followed the Lord. Verse 6. All right, 6, last half 6. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, lie with me. But he refused, and said to his master's wife, behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And so here he is. He's successful. The Potiphar trusts him. They're boys. Like, yeah, man, you got it. I trust you with everything. I'll give you everything. Like, I can walk out of this place and know that you got it nailed down. You're holding it down. I ain't got to worry a care in the world when I know you're in charge. My wife's a nurse. And is she in here? Oh, she's back there. Okay. So she might get mad because I tell the story. But she works at a local hospital. I'm not going to tell you which one. She can tell you. But she's a charge nurse some days. And some days she's not a charge nurse. And when she goes in, the day she's not a charge nurse, she comes home, and she's pretty frustrated. And she tells me about all the things that happen at work. Not all the things. I better be careful because she's a nurse. She doesn't violate HIPAA or any of that kind of stuff. But she just tells me about all the stuff that goes on that frustrates her. And then she'll go in on a day as a charge nurse, and she'll come home and tell me about all the things that frustrate her. But the difference is when she comes home, there have been several times where she has told me that her supervisor has been there, or the person filling in for her supervisor has been there, and they've come to her and said, when you're in charge, I know everything's going to run smoothly. I appreciate that. So there's something about someone embracing, even in the midst of adversity, even in the midst of struggle, even in the midst of something that they don't like. And there are days when lots of things happen at the hospital that Carrie doesn't like, and she tells me she really doesn't like it. But she has devoted herself to do the best that she can in the situation she's been planted in. She knows she cannot change it. She knows it's above her rank, and it's not above her capability to do anything to change the situation other than what is within her job description. And so she does her best. Joseph did his best. He made the best of the situation of where he found himself planted in. And as he comes along, the only thing that he knew he was off limits was the Potiphar's wife. But the Potiphar's wife saw him. He was successful. He was good looking. He was built, probably. This young guy. And she took a liking to him. And she said, come here, baby. Come here a minute. Now Joseph's a slave, young man. I don't know about you guys. When I was a young man, I would have hesitated there. Like, But Joseph, being a man of God, saw the situation and saw the temptation. And his first reaction is, no, this is wrong. And he ran from temptation. Now, in the next couple of verses, we see that Potiphar's wife didn't give up. Like, she had it in her mind that she was going to get her hands on Joseph. So time and time again, He'd be there, she'd be there. And they're like, come here, baby. Nope. Well, one day he got sloppy. And the scripture tells us that he went in and she grabbed a hold of his garment and said, come here, baby. And he said, no. And he took off running. What I think is interesting about Joseph is that his clothes keep getting him in trouble. Because when he ran off, that garment was still in the hands of the Potiphar's wife. And when he got out of there, as soon as he was gone, she screamed bloody murder because I'm sure she was embarrassed. She was tired of being rejected. She said, all right, if I can't get my way with Joseph, I'm going to teach him a lesson. Turn me down. Didn't get away. I'll teach him. And so she screams for the guards and said, look, he left his garment. He came in, he tried to assault me. He tried to have his way. And all of a sudden, Joseph's world starts to unravel. And we see at the end of chapter 39, after the wife goes and tells Potiphar, it says, as soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, verse 19, this is the way your servant treated me. His anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. So here goes Joseph. He's gotten out of the pit. He couldn't claw his way out. He couldn't drag his way out. He couldn't bargain his way out, but he wound up being sold into slavery. He was yanked out and sold into slavery, ripped away from his family. And he works, he does everything he's supposed to until he is the top man in his master's house. He goes from being favored son to the top man. He's rebuilt his life. He's a successful man. He's a good-looking man. And here he is. He's got it all going on as much as he can for be a slave. And one person saying one thing destroys it all. We work so hard on our lives. We work so hard to get all these things that we think we need, that we think we want, that we think we have to have. And time again, I see in the lives of people that as they attempt to make their lives the picture of perfection, that something comes along and tears them down and rocks their world. And sometimes what I see is when the storm comes, when they get totally rocked, they fall to pieces. But there are a few people that I've seen, when everything falls apart, when everything disintegrates from underneath them, they keep their eyes on God and keep moving forward. Because they understand the first principle this morning we're going to talk about is that sometimes God builds you up so that you can be torn down. We have to understand, if this is God's story and God's got a plan, then maybe, just maybe, He might know what He's doing. Maybe, just maybe, there's a purpose in the destruction. I wrote this week for a newsletter article for the church about seasons. And it's interesting about seasons because I love fall. I think fall is awesome. I can't wait till it gets about 50, 40 degrees at night and about 60 degrees in the day. I'm ready for the fires outside. I'm ready for the sweaters and the boots and all that good stuff. But if you ever stop and think about it, and we live right here on the Parkway where you can go and take a drive and see all the beautiful colors, but if you think about it for a minute. We take pictures and go observe all the colors of the leaves. And we talk about it being beautiful and how much we love it. But think about this. What we are admiring during the fall is death. The leaves are dead and falling off. That's why they change color. And they're going to fall to the ground and they're going to disintegrate and rot and return to the earth. So that after winter goes by, spring can come along and out comes new life. Without the fall, spring wouldn't be possible. Without fall and winter, we wouldn't have the new life. It's necessary for our growth that some things pass away. God designed it like that. So maybe, just maybe, if God builds you up and then you are torn down, maybe, just maybe, the point was that he built you up so you could be torn down. That's his prerogative. And many times we find ourselves in the ashes, in the rubble, and we look around and say, what happened? What did I do wrong? Why, God? Why did you do this to me? And we forget the story isn't over. If you're sucking air, the story isn't over. You know, Joseph did what was right. The temptation came. He had everything to lose, and he did. He lost it all. But never for a minute do we think that Joseph made the wrong choice. He made the right choice. Everybody in here agree with that, right? All right? I'll just make sure. Sometimes the right choice leads us to deeper struggle. It may sound like a bad idea at the time. It may look like you're going to lose everything. Stepping out on faith, doing what's right. But God never said the choices would be easy. What he said was he'd be with us through it all. And so sometimes when you're picking a path and making a decision, well, this is going to be really hard. I don't know if we can do this. I don't know if we can give this because to the church. I don't know if we can tithe or give this offering because our finances are kind of shaky. I don't know if we can afford to do that. Or I don't know if we can commit to be involved in this ministry in the church because maybe it's going to take time away from our family and time away from our kids and time away from our job. And our kids might not be able to be involved in that 8th travel ball team, or they might not be able to go to that extracurricular dance class or whatever it is. And we think, oh, man, that's going to be hard. Is it worth it? Sometimes the right choice leads to struggle. Sometimes God says, hold on, I need you to be trusting in me where I'm taking you, and not where you're taking yourself. And so Joseph's in prison. It's interesting. We talked last week about the enemy. We talked about Satan attacking us. He's coming. He's waiting. He's looking for that opportunity where you're vulnerable, where you're separated, where you're out on your own. Just like Joseph was out there on his own. It's just him and his brothers. I mean, it was one on the rest of them. 10 at the time, I think. I count right. And in that moment, they pounce. The enemy is waiting for you. But understand this. Some of you in here have been in church long enough. Your faith is strong enough. You've seen enough. You have deep enough wisdom and understanding of who God is that Satan, the enemy, will not get you. But I got news for you. The enemy isn't going to give up just because you're strong and stubborn and not willing to back down. Sometimes, if the enemy can't get to you, he will lie about you. Let me say it again. If the enemy can't get to you, he will lie about you. See, Satan's the master of deception. I'm going to pick on a boy right here, Jonathan. Enemy might not be able to shake you. He might try to rock you. But he might start spreading lies about you. Well, he thinks he's all puffed up with pride because he sings in the band. He's so loud, you don't even need the mic. He's got pipes, y'all. Jonathan isn't proud. If you've met Jonathan, you know he's not proud. well, he's not a really good Christian. Look at those tattoos on his arm. How could he be? Start spreading all these little lies. So that while he might not be tearing him down, he might be tearing him down in the eyes of the people around him. He'll try to take your credibility. He'll try to take the people's trust from you. He'll try to take everything he can. If he can't get you to fall into temptation, he'll do everything he can to make everybody around you fall into temptation. And so Joseph's in prison. He's been lied about. He's been tempted. He's made the right choice. Done everything right. He's a successful man. And he's in prison. Listen to what it says. But the Lord was with Joseph, still with Joseph in prison, and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. I don't know where you are in life right now. I don't know if you are just busting out and just getting it. Like this, you are in the picture of perfection. You are favored in the Father's house. You are the top dog. Maybe you're in the pit, or maybe you are in the prison. But wherever you are, understand this, that every opportunity is a God opportunity. Every opportunity is a God opportunity. Note, wherever you go, whatever you do, God's at work. Joseph continued to be obedient to God and was faithful in his relationship with God. And God saw that. God was with him in steadfast love, unshakable, unmovable, unchangeable love. And Joseph succeeded in everything he did. Everywhere he went, he moved up to the top dog. Now, it might not be a big deal. Some of you, like, well, he went from top dog in his dad's house to top dog as a slave to top dog as a prisoner. It sounds like he's going down. But God's putting him in situations and giving him opportunities. And notice what happens in chapter 40. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. And the captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with him, and he attended them. And they continued for some time in custody. So here's Joseph. He has been put in prison, knocked down, torn down, then built up to be the top dog in the prison. And two of the people that are right at the right hand of the king, right there beside him, are put in prison, and they're put in Joseph's care. God was setting up an opportunity. Note this. I want it to be very clear that God didn't set up the opportunity because Joseph was in prison. God didn't set up the opportunity because Joseph was in prison and was faithful. God didn't set up the opportunity because he wanted to do Joseph a favor. He set up the opportunity for Joseph to go to prison because he had planned for Joseph to interact with the cupbearer and the baker. God doesn't look at your situation and say, well, hey, Corey over here, she's doing what she's supposed to. She's being good. I'm going to give her a gift. Well, Paul over here, he's not, so he's going to get ignored. But I'm going to give a gift to Corey. I'm going to put an opportunity here. I'm going to set up all these things because she's been good. God is not Santa Claus. He is not making a list. He is not checking it twice. He's not marking off the naughty and nice. No, God is in the works all the time. He knew what was coming. The opportunity was already coming and planned. Joseph just had to be ready. And because he was faithful, he was ready. Your faithfulness does not determine what God does. Your faithfulness determines your readiness for what God does when it happens. We don't ask you and tell you you need to be in church, you need to be in a small group or a Sunday school group, you need to be here and serving because we think that we just want a big church with lots of people in it. We tell you that because we want you to be all geared up and ready to go. So that when the opportunity comes, you're ready. My friend Kevin Dance took my son hunting yesterday. The reason Kevin Dance took my son hunting is because I don't hunt. You've seen me up here on stage, y'all, okay? Sitting out in the woods, hours at a time, being quiet, is not something that I excel at. Like, if there was one thing on this earth that I was not made to do, it was sit and be quiet. From the time I was born, even though I'm uphill, I can't sit and be quiet. Can't. I can either do one or the other. I can't do both. Yeah, Carrie. She's giving a thumbs up. But I don't know anything about hunting. First of all, growing up, who would give me a gun? Like, really? Like, you gotta remember, I didn't have my pill till I was like 28 years old. So there was like 28 years where I was like, woo! So nobody was handing me a gun and saying, no, everybody was like, get him out, get those out of the room. Like, keep him away from that. So Kevin takes my son out. What I learned about my son and what he needed, he didn't have any camo. So I had to go out and get him camo. He didn't have a license, so I had to go out and do the paperwork to get him a license. He doesn't have a gun, so he's borrowing a gun. So eventually I'm going to have to get him a gun so he can have his own, so he can go out on his own with other people. He needs to be equipped. A few weeks ago, before Kevin said he'd take him out, he said, we need to see how he handles a gun. And he's shot guns before, but never a hunting rifle. So we went out and borrowed the gun and went out to a course and took some practice shots, and it turns out he's a pretty good shot. And he was ready. And so 6:30 yesterday morning, I get a knock on the door. Kevin's here, and Isaac's ready. He's got his camo on. He's got his hunting license. He's ready to go. He's taking a shower, thank the Lord. Boy, stank. He's 13. He stank. But he was ready. Kevin, if my son had come out yesterday in a pair of shorts and a T-shirt, doused himself in Axe, body spray, and never shot a gun, I'm willing to bet yesterday would not have gone very well. They didn't get anything, but they saw a lot. Because Isaac was ready. Kevin had helped get him ready. God's trying to get you ready. He uses his church to get you ready. He uses the leaders of the church to pour into you and get you ready. Are you ready? Are you ready for the God opportunity? Are you ready for where God wants to take you? Here's the thing. Here's what happens. We're running short, so y'all listen too slow. 3 more points. I'm going to be quick. And I'm going to summarize the rest of the scripture. So Joseph gets in. He's taking care of this cupbearer and this baker. And these 2 people have dreams. And they're freaked out by our dreams. You ever wake up from a dream freaked out? I did that twice this week. It was weird. So they wake up from these dreams, and so they go to Joseph and say, hey, you know anything about dreams? We had weird dreams. And Joseph says, I have a little experience with dreams. Didn't turn out so well for me, but let me take a listen. So they tell him the dream, and the first one tells him his dream. He's like, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get your place back. You're going to get out of here, and you're going to get your place back. Well, the other guy says, man, that sounds good. Let me tell you my dream. It says, your dream means you're going to die. And they both think about it and say, yeah, okay, well, we'll see what happens. They both get out of prison. The first guy gets his job back. The other guy gets hung. And it says that when all this happened, and the cupbearer got his place back, instead of remembering Joseph, he forgot him. The first verse in chapter 41 says, after 2 whole years, Pharaoh had a dream, and the cupbearer remembered Joseph. Every opportunity is a God opportunity. But the payoff isn't always instant. Oh, I think if I just do this one thing, that God will bless me, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to see it. Corey and I have talked about, they started the Shine Sisters ministry last year, and they've had some pretty good success. Well, I say pretty good. They've had astounding success. And we are blessed at Lynn Haven to have them. But listen to me. As I've talked to them, I've reminded them that not every time you start an initiative, not every ministry you start launches like that. Sometimes you struggle. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes you have to reinvent. And sometimes you just have to be patient and consistent and continue pressing towards the goal. And God will bless your faithfulness. There's a bunch of preacher boys out there that have to learn this lesson because they get these big eyes. They see these prominent pastors who start a church and they become the fastest growing church in America in like the first year. And they're like, oh, I want to do that. And they get out and they plant a church and they get like 20 people for like the first 5 years and they never grow. And they get discouraged and then they quit and they go do something else. And what they don't understand is that God doesn't always call us to something that He's going to pay out right away. Sometimes we have to be patient. Sometimes we have to go through the process. We, as humans, do not like the process. The process is hard. It's long. The other reason I don't go hunting, I told Kevin this, is that there's more to hunting than just taking aim and firing. Once you hit that animal, there's some work to be done. I don't do blood and guts. My wife watches all these medical shows, like, not medical shows, but like shows with a medical premise. Like, we used to watch ER, and she likes Grey's Anatomy. And like, she said, here, come watch this episode with me of Grey's Anatomy one time. And it, like, somebody broke their leg, and I had to leave the room because like the bone was sticking out. And I was like limping because I felt it. Like, it's just, I couldn't handle it. I don't do blood and guts. And so, like, the process that comes after the hunt and to get the meat prepared, I don't like that part. So I don't do it. I don't hunt. I don't do any of it. And as nasty as that could be, as dirty as that can be, as tough as that can be, the process that God has got us going through right now in this life, on this journey in our story to get us where He wants us is even more so nasty, dirty, difficult. And if God showed you what you were going to have to go through to get where He wants to take you, you wouldn't do it. Because we don't like the process. We live in the instant culture. You can go down to McDonald's and get breakfast right now. You can go down and in the Verizon, get a phone right now. You can go anywhere and get whatever you want right now. God doesn't work that way. You see, sometimes, process is the purpose. Sometimes the difficult journey you're going through right now is the whole point. You're looking to get to the end, and God says, no, you're right where I want you. Joseph was looking, I want to get out of prison, but God says, no. You're right where I want you, so then in 2 years they know where to find you. I don't know where you're at right now. I don't know what your story is. I do know this. That God has you where He wants you. and he'll have you there until he wants you somewhere else. Flourish where you're planted. Be obedient and faithful where he has you. And be ready for the opportunity that he brings. Will you pray with me? Father, this morning, as we come, as we prepare to go about our day and leave this place, God, I pray that we'll look around our surroundings and realize that this story isn't about us. These difficulties aren't a punishment, or they're not an ignoring of your attention, but rather they are part of our story. It's a process that you have us going through to get us where you need us so that your story could be furthered. God, give us hope. Give us an excitement. Even the roughest of times, give way to your glory. God, this morning, I pray for each and every person in this room, understand my voice, that they'll leave here refreshed and renewed. In your name I pray. Amen.